Not for the fun part. So, I love you too. But not as much as my wife and children. Okay.
Hi, my name is Audra, and I'm from Orange Coast College in California. In the new Me Too age, and with the left dominating the conversation with what to do about sexual assault and how men are the problem, what is the conservative approach, in your opinion, about how to prevent sexual assault and how we as a society can protect sexual assault victims?
Okay, so a couple of things that we can do systemically. One is that we need to create a culture where when something terrible happens to a woman, she feels comfortable going to the police and reporting it. I understand that it's very difficult for women to do this. I understand that's very rough. And we need to make it easier. We need to find ways that make it easier for women to do that, because people who sexually abuse women should be, I would say, beaten the hell out of, but that's not a real legal term. They should, you know, as I've said many times before, rapists should be castrated or killed. As far as, but in terms of what we as a culture really can do, what we really can do is we need to actually train men. When feminists say things like train men not to rape, all I can think of is there is not a decent man in the history of the world whose father said to him, son, don't rape. There's not a decent, it's never happened, because the truth is that when you're training a child to be a good person, what you're actually training that child in is being a good person, not being a bad person. Right? You don't train your kid, don't be a bad person. You train your kid, I expect of you certain things. So men are built for creation or destruction. I have a 2-year-old son. He's either building blocks or he's tearing them down. That's all he does. And this is just true for how men tend to work. You either train men to be protectors, and that their job on planet Earth is to protect more vulnerable people. This is men, women, and children, right? More vulnerable people. It is their job to particularly protect women who do require special protection from other men because they're the most likely to be preyed upon by other men. That men's job is to stand up and do something when they see something like this. Right? Obviously, that is a major factor. What the feminist movement has tried to do is remove, in order to fight sexism, they want to say that patriarchalism has created this sense of superiority among men. That's not what's going on at all. Instead, what they've done is they've removed men's mission. When you tell men don't protect women, men become more likely to treat women as objects. Men's job is to protect women. A real man protects women. A real man does not hurt women.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I study at Ramapo College of New Jersey. I just wanted to know what you think about the Young Advocates for Fair Education and the lawsuit in New York against Jewish Orthodox schools who don't provide any secular education. I wanted to know what you think about the lawsuit and if you think that they will win.
So I don't know enough about the lawsuit to actually comment on it. You'd have to kind of describe the basis.
So basically, there's the founder of this organization. He's a former Hasidic Jew, and he was going after schools that don't provide secular education to their students, and then the kids come out to the world and they don't really know how to function in the world. They don't know history. They can't really read. They don't have reading comprehension. So it's just a lawsuit against the schools in New York City.
So again, I'd actually want to see what the standards were. I mean, if the standard is you don't learn anything, I think
there is no secular education.
I mean, listen, I think that secular education in a civil society is a necessity. So, you know, and that holds true regardless of religious affiliation. You should, you know, if you're going to have a school, then you should teach your kids enough that they can function in the society. That seems like a basic predicate. With that said, I tend to be rather libertarian on most topics, and so I'd want to know whether this is actually child endangerment or child abuse, and I'd have to know more about the case to know that, or whether we are ranging into the government telling parents what they must teach children, and how far we're ranging, because I could see a sort of slippery slope argument where the left suddenly declares that it is the job of religious schools to teach certain social values, for example. We're going to get that in California pretty soon. So again, as a lawyer, I'm hesitant to comment on cases that I haven't actually examined, but my basic feeling is that, yes, of course, it's child endangerment if you're not teaching your children anything at all. And by the same token, I want to make sure that we're not invading parental rights. That's the balance.
Thank you.
Hi, Ben. James from Binghamton University in New York. And one of the issues that you say is most important and that I would agree on, but that is not talked about much, is entitlement reform. And oftentimes when I try to talk about this, I'm told that I'm just uncompassionate and I really just don't care about people. So, which is not true. But what would be your best approach to starting a conversation and a productive one about entitlement reform?
So, I mean, fortunately, when people accuse me of not caring about people, I don't care.
That's right. That's right.
But it's... but what's so weird about this particular argument is the idea that you don't care about people if you are simply suggesting that we reform entitlement so that it is there for people in the future. I'm not a big fan of entitlement programs as a general rule. Number one, I don't like the verbiage of entitlement programs because I don't think that you're entitled to virtually anything in life except for opportunity. Everything else, you have certain rights, and those are enshrined in the Constitution and pre-exist government. Other than that, you're not entitled to anybody else's money. You're certainly not entitled to a program where you put in $50 a month 50 years ago, and now you're taking out $3,000 a month, right? You're not entitled to that. But with that said, we have made promises to a lot of older folks, and we should keep those promises. Now, the question is, what do we do with everybody as we age the population? What do we do to fix these entitlement programs or move away from them entirely? And I think what we're going to need is a transitional program that raises the retirement age, that lowers the benefits on a sliding scale as we get to a younger population, and that lets every single person in this room opt out of Social Security. Right? Every single person in this room should be able to take their money and put it where they want. The idea that the government is going to... The idea the government's going to take my money away from me and put it in a lockbox somewhere and then spend it on somebody else because it's not actually in an Al Gore lockbox, and that then I'm going to be returned that money is a bunch of nonsense. I'm not a child. I'm an adult. And it's my money. Okay? I don't need you treating my money like it's your piggy bank. So if you want to preserve these programs, this is the part where the left is just insane. When Paul Ryan says, I want to preserve these programs and they need changes, the left goes crazy because the window of available political wins is very short. And so we're just going to, the reality is both parties are going to keep kicking this thing down the road. I like a lot of the stuff President Trump has done, but he declared in the 2016 election cycle he wasn't going to touch entitlements because he feels like it's a political third rail. Right? He thinks those ought to be maintained or increased. That's because there are easy political wins in telling people that you're going to give them money that's never going to materialize or that you can always hand off to your kids. The Social Security is going to be bankrupt within the next 15 years. It's already running in the red like today. The idea that we can continue along this path without any sort of massive tax increase, massive cut to entitlements, or massive increase in the retirement age is just fantasy. Now, saying that may be politically unpopular, but once you're elected, it seems to me that it is your job to say these things. And even if you're trying to get elected, being honest with the American people, I think, is a necessity.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ben. My name's Ryan, and I'm from the United Kingdom. And one of the things I seem to have noticed about similarity between the British left and the American right is that they both conflate universality in healthcare with socialized medicine. Mm-hmm. And I like the part in your speech where you said about the fact that Switzerland has a more market-based healthcare system,
right,
yet it still has universality. So why don't more American conservatives argue from that position?
So that was originally what Romney Care was sort of supposed to be. I think that the problem is that people in the United States have a general view of healthcare, which is that it is not my job to pay for your healthcare because healthcare is not a public good. I generally agree with this point of view, by the way, because healthcare, in order for something to be a public good, it has to be non-excludable, non-rivalrous. Right? It has to be something like the military, where it can't exclude a particular person, and your use of the military doesn't diminish my use of the military. That's not true in medicine. My use of medicine has nothing to do with your use of medicine, so it really is an individual concern. Forcing people to pay for a level of insurance seems tyrannical to a lot of Americans because the idea that a government can force you to buy anything, particularly just for the sake of living, right? It's not even like car insurance. Car insurance, you can say, okay, well, you can't drive without car insurance, but they're basically saying you can't live without health insurance, right? You have to buy it. So on a principled level, a lot of conservatives have a problem with that, which is okay for conservatives because our answer is now it's your responsibility to go do that, and if you don't do that, then you bear the cost of that. The problem is that a bunch of people don't do it, and then they don't want to bear the cost of it, and so now what do you do? And so I think that it depends on which question you're trying to answer. If you're trying to answer, how do we get universality in healthcare with the highest quality of care, and universality is your sole concern, then the Swiss healthcare model is probably the best. If you're looking at how do you get the highest quality healthcare for people who are willing to pay for it, right, and we're not going to force anybody, and if you don't get it, it's your problem, then a free market-based system is the best because the markets always create better supply and better product. Right? In the same way they did with LASIK eye surgery, where it used to be $20,000 an eye, insurance doesn't cover it. There's been tremendous advances, people have gone into ophthalmology, and then it has reduced the cost of LASIK eye surgery to like $5,000 an eye. Free markets work in healthcare the same way they work anywhere else. The big problem is that people are asking the question about universality. Markets do not guarantee universality. They guarantee access, but they don't guarantee universality. And so if you're answering universality, of course you need government to mandate it. If you don't care about universality, but you care more about quality, then you want a free market system. And this is why Dan McLaughlin in National Review, he's basically said, any healthcare system, you're looking for 3 qualities, but you can only have 2. Right? Universality, affordability, quality. You can only have 2 of those 3. You can't have all 3. You can have affordability and universality. You're not going to have quality. It's going to be kind of crappy. You can have quality and universality, but that's going to be kind of expensive. Or you can have quality and affordability, which is going to be a market-based system, but it won't be universal because a bunch of people will opt out, not get their insurance, get hit by a car, and then whine about it. Right? So this is, you know, the question is, which system do you care most about? Because I'm more libertarian, I believe that people should bear the responsibility of their actions, and we should have social safety nets generally created voluntarily by communities in order to help pick people up who fall down.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ariella Shapiro, High Point University.
No relation.
No relation. I have been asked like 16 times by my peers. So my question
If
is,
you want, we can pretend, and then you'll have lots of friends.
they say that I should pretend like, oh, you should tell people that you're related to him. I'm like, I think he knows who he's related to. I feel like you're that kind of person. So my question is a little bit more lighthearted, I guess. So based off of just Cardi B and the video that, and the
Cardi
video,
B, my tax hero. That's
yeah,
right.
exactly. She should be everyone's tax hero if we take what she said in that video.
If I'm ever president, she's my Secretary of the Treasury.
So my question is, kind of going off of that and her sentiment, maybe in a little bit of a more eloquent fashion, do you think that do you think that the leftist ideals that have infiltrated and been pushed by Hollywood and popular media for however long that's been happening for, do you think that that's changing? Do you think that we're seeing a shift? Because I don't think Cardi B actually realizes that she's not really a leftist when she says things like that.
Right.
But because she's obviously she lives the life that she lives, she's associated with the people that she's associated with, she probably doesn't know how to identify in any other way.
Yeah.
So do you think that that's going to happen? How long do you think that's
Yeah, I
going
mean,
to
I
take?
do think that a lot of the political barriers are breaking down. I mean, as folks in this room know, I'm not a rap fan, but yeah, soft applause. But you know, what Kanye West did was actually quite brave, right? When Kanye came out and he said, "Listen, you can think how you want to think," good for Kanye West. I mean, this guy's still a nutcase, but good for him. I mean, go read his old tweets about fur pillows and fish tanks. There is a new generation of people in Hollywood who don't feel like they got there by accident and who feel like they've worked very hard for their money, and when they look at their tax bill, they're going, wait a second. Why am I supposed to feel guilty about earning a lot of money when I was working at a coffee bean as a barista 3 years ago, and I worked my tail off, and I wrote scripts in my spare time, and now the government's going to take 50% of my cash? So yeah, there's an innate rebellion that's happening against some of this stuff. Also, I think that some of the test cases for the left in Hollywood have sort of dissipated in terms of importance. So for example, 5 years ago, the big thing in Hollywood was if you were against same-sex marriage, you could not work in Hollywood. Like, you could not work in Hollywood. Now, obviously, since Auberge fell, there's not much that anybody can do about the issue of same-sex marriage. Now, I've been libertarian on same-sex marriage since, I think, 2012, not because I am morally in favor of same-sex marriage, but because I don't think that the government has a place in this sphere. Right? And I never thought the government had a place in this sphere generally because the government sucks at everything, and when I married my wife, I didn't do it for the tax discount, right? There is actually, spoiler alert, there's no tax discount. But since that has sort of been alleviated, there is a libertarian rise in Hollywood, particularly among young Hollywood folks, that's kind of astounding. Like, I've been kind of shocked, actually, at the number of relatively major stars whose names that you would know who listen to the show, and who have actually visited our offices under cover of darkness, and whose names I will not mention, because apparently if you say you should follow me on Twitter now, did you see that thing that happened a couple of weeks ago? I mean, it was just wild, right? Where this director, this indie director named Mark Duplass, he came into our office. He hung out there for like an hour and a half asking me questions about gun control, and I was nice to him. And then he tweeted out, you know, Shapiro's a nice guy, and you might want to give him a follow on Twitter. And the entire world caved in on him. And he deleted the tweet, and then he apologized for it, saying I was a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe in the Maoist apology terminology. And then somehow James Gunn got involved, and then James Gunn ended up being fired, which which does confirm my theory that I am basically Thanos, and that by and that almost literally by sitting there and snapping my fingers, I can make half the MCU disappear. But it's but it is the level of intolerance is exactly the same as it ever was in Hollywood. But there's a group of young people who are looking at politics right now, and they feel adrift. They don't feel at home in the Democratic Party, which is increasingly radical and insane, and they don't feel at home in the Republican Party, mainly because a lot of them don't like President Trump very much. So I think that's creating some openings. There's some political realignments that are underway that are kind of fascinating.
Thank you.
Okay, hi Ben. My name is Sam Dean. I'm from Maryville University in St. Louis. And so, given Missouri is about to vote on right to work, I want to know what your stance is on labor unions and right to work legislation.
So my stance on labor unions is that if you can get people to voluntarily join a labor union without kneecapping folks, they're fine. I have no problem with collective bargaining. If you and your friends are working at a business and you decide to get together and then collectively bargain because that's what you choose to do, then there's nothing even anti-free market about that. You can bargain exactly how you want to bargain. What I do oppose is the state either taking wages from workers to pay to a union, which is the most corrupt crap I've ever heard of, or this idea that unions can be granted collective bargaining status with a simple majority vote of a group of people within a particular government-approved industry. Like, I don't understand how that works. Why is it that I work in the teaching industry and I don't want to join the union, and now I'm going to be forced to pay union dues in order to work in this particular state, or this union is going to bargain on my behalf, so I can't bargain individually. I'm the best teacher in the state, and I can't bargain individually with the school. That seems to me a violation of my freedom to dispense with my labor at a price that I choose. So I find all of this, right to work is a great thing. Again, I have no problem with labor unions that are voluntary associations. I do have a problem with anybody using compulsion in any way, whether it's governmental or whether it is informal.
Good afternoon. My question, I'm Jeremy, by the way. I'm from Benedictine University, just outside of Chicago. My question, actually, I like that you mentioned the part about education, because I myself am actually a future teacher. And my question to you is regarding, how you said that, sooner or later 7-year-olds are going to start dictating our educational policies, the labor unions, and that is something that I fear, just because, I don't think that our policy should be determined by 7-year-olds. It should be determined by the state, the local governments, as well as the labor union should not be dictating, because what have they done? In my home state of Illinois, we just had Governor Rauner overturn a large union.
Right, I'm following it.
Mm-hmm, so. Yes. So what advice can you give me going in as a future teacher and kind of, maybe going against the usual status quo, which is, if you're a teacher, you support the unions?
Right. I think that this is the same advice that I give students who are in college, and that is that if you are you can push as far as you can push, and then you can push no further. And this is a personal decision you're going to have to make. There's certain institutional biases against you. You have to determine what you're willing to lose your job over, what you are willing to simply be hated over, and what you don't want to be bothered over. And this is a decision I can't make for you, right? It's a decision you're going to have to make yourself, where you think you can do the most good, because you know your skill set better than I do.
Absolutely.
And so I've always said, about whether it's actors in Hollywood or teachers or students in college, your use of your own skill set is, in the most productive way, is what's important. And getting fired may not be the most productive use of your own skill set if you can help inculcate values to hundreds of students versus getting fired over taking a stand. You really do have to calculate these things out. So think through where you can do the most good, and then I know it's vague, but I can't make the decision for you, and nobody should.
I understand.
Right? So that's the basic.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Ben. My name is Tyler Warren from Missouri Baptist University in St. Louis. With the welfare state being just horrible and doing the exact opposite of what it was intended to do, or what the Democrats thought it was intended to do, what is your thoughts on replacing welfare with a negative income tax for the bottom 20% to give them a way to work up out of poverty?
Right. So this is the basic Milton Friedman idea that he proposes in Freedom and Capitalism. It's a better argument than the welfare state. The negative income tax would be a superior proposal to the welfare state itself. I'm concerned that any government subsidy is bound to move in the wrong direction as politicians get a hold of it, blow it up, and use it for class warfare. So if you were able to set the policy and then this is just the policy, then maybe that's the best form of the policy. But being that politicians inevitably get a hold of this stuff and then use it for political gain, what I've really suggested is that if you want to have a serious way of fighting poverty, that's going to have to not be done at the federal level. It's not really even going to have to be done at the state level. It's really going to have to be done at the local and family level. The reality is that as government programs grow, charity drops. As taxes increase, the social safety net that is provided by your neighbors and your family decreases. This even happens with Social Security. Like it used to be that as your parents aged, the expectation is that you were going to take care of your parents. Now the expectation is that, quote unquote, society is going to take care of your parents. The same thing happens with poverty. In my community, there are impoverished people, my Jewish community, there are impoverished people. And when there are people who are impoverished, they go to the rabbi, and the rabbi basically makes an appeal to the community. Can you help this person out? And what's good about that is the person knows where the money is coming from. The person feels a kinship with the people they're taking the money from, and they feel a sense of, I don't want to take money from the people I have to live with. I'm going to get out there, I'm going to do something. Even the idea of a nameless, faceless organization that is giving you free money is a perverse incentive to a certain extent. So if I had to rank these things, obviously it would be welfare state at the bottom, and then negative income tax, and then private charity at the very top. Whatever we can do to incentivize private charity, I think would be significantly better for both the giver and the recipient than any government program.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Luke Keller from the University of Cincinnati, and my question is, many atheists argue that morality can exist independently of religion. How would you counter that?
They're wrong. So let me say this. You can be a moral person and not be a religious person, obviously. I know many atheists who I think are really moral people, for sure. You cannot build a system of supposedly objective morality on a belief in materialist atheism. You can't even answer the question as to why human beings should have an innate value in a materialist atheist universe. I think the most, as I said, I think the most important sentence ever written is written in the book of Genesis, where it says that man was made in God's image. It is the most important sentence ever written in the history of humanity, because that is the basic principle that underlies individual rights, individual freedoms, natural law. Right? All of these things are based on this. I keep pitching this book that I've been writing. It's coming out at the beginning of next year. It is all about this specific topic. Basically, the theory is that Western civilization was built on two poles: Jerusalem, the idea of Judeo-Christian values, and Athens, the idea of Greek reason. And that these two have been in constant interplay up until basically the beginning, the launching of America, and then we've destroyed both of those. We've destroyed Judeo-Christian value systems, and we've also destroyed Greek reason in the name of subjectivity, and this has led to tremendous suffering and a tremendous sense of aimlessness and purposelessness for a lot of folks. You cannot build a system of objective morality on atheism, because the atheist argument is essentially that we are balls of meat wandering around in a meaningless universe. I don't know how you build a morality off of that. Why? It doesn't bother you when a lion eats a zebra, and it doesn't bother you when a snake kills another snake. Why would it bother you when a person kills another person? Now, that's not to say that cultures that are atheist don't have laws against murder. They do. But that is mainly for purposes, I would think, of self-defense and order. It's not a moral argument. It's a utilitarian one. So you could create a utilitarian morality, but then again, you'd have to decide what hierarchy of values decides the utilitarian, right? Because every utilitarianism has to decide what's more important than something else, right? Is it more important that people are free, or is it more important that people have health care? It depends, right? You can make arguments either way. There is no guaranteed objective moral standard in any of that. In order to build a system of rights, particularly, you have to believe that individual human beings have innate value regardless of their capacity. And that, I think, cannot be achieved by making a leap from material balls of meat that have randomly firing neurons that are evolutionarily beneficial. I don't know how you get from, I really don't know how you get from apes to morals with nothing in between.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Ray Johnson, and I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. I'd just like to say I'm a big fan of your podcasts and shows and everything. I have a question concerning people being influential, and you're very influential in the conservative movement. Who would you say is leading people astray from what you're teaching and everything? You'd have to name like the #1 person to tell someone that.
Oh no. So I will follow Reagan's 11th commandment and not smack anybody who I feel like is generally on my side of the aisle here. I know you're tempting me. Don't tempt me, Frodo. I'll speak in general terms. I think that people who follow personalities over principles are leading the movement astray. I think that people I think that people who pitch victimhood mentality to people who happen to be their political allies are leading people astray. I think that people who think that reaction to the left is more important than speaking actual eternal principles are leading people astray. I understand that it's fun to punch people. I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things, right? I do it for a living. But but I think that, as I've said before, if you are going to own the libs, in the popular phrase, then you actually ought to own them, not lease them. So what people right now are doing is they are leasing the libs. Okay, what I mean by that is that they are essentially doing things just to piss people off on the left because it's fun to piss people off on the left. But guess what? Virtually everything pisses somebody off on the left. Like legitimately everything. They're mad, right? They're just angry people a lot. And so doing that may actually drive them further to the left, and may actually, the way that you actually own the libs is not by owning them, but by convincing them to be part of our team. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't publicly humiliate bad arguments, right? I like publicly humiliating bad arguments because I'm not actually talking to the person I'm debating with. I'm talking to the audience. But I think there is a tendency on our side to treasure trollery above substance, to treasure insults over argumentation. It's very funny. A lot of folks on the left have this perception of me that because there are a bunch of Ben Shapiro Destroys videos on the internet, that what I do is I just go out and I call people jackasses. But the reality is that if you actually watch any of those videos, they are basically sane conversations in which the person on the other side just runs out of things to say. That's the transgenderism video, that has 50 million views is me being pretty polite to somebody in the audience. You can own the day by winning the argument in a polite fashion, and actually doing that is how you convince people, not by calling people names or being mean or any of that. It's emotionally satisfying to watch people be mean to other people, but it's not actually particularly convincing. So I would start with, again, if you treasure a person, if you follow a person, not a principle, and it's, I trust this person to play 16-degree underwater, upside down, hungry, hungry hippos. And that everything this person does is part of a brilliant master plan that no one except this person can possibly figure out, then I think that you're being foolish. I think that the principle matters more than the person. And if you are solely reacting to the left as opposed to promulgating an agenda that combines virtue and liberty, you're doing it wrong.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Ben. I'm Adam Duarte from Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, so right in your backyard. I wanted to bring up the topic of nationalism because that's been kind of a big thing on the right. So you spoke on the rise of socialism in America's left, and I wanted to know, to ask about the rise and defense of nationalism by those on the right and other conservatives. So can you discuss the difference between patriotism and nationalism and the dangers that can come from that?
Okay,
Thanks.
so I think that there is nationalism, like pure form nationalism, and then there is patriotism that is tinged with nationalism, and I think that they're not the same thing. So this argument has been sort of raging over in the pages of National Review between folks like Rich Lowry on the one side, Ramesh Ponnuru on the one side, and maybe Jonah Goldberg and me on the other side. And the argument for patriotism is that America is a creedal country, that America is about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the values that undergird it, right? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Anyone can become an American. It's not about where you were born. It's not about the borders of the country. It's about the principles that you espouse. So a person who is living abroad in Japan could be more of an American than a person who was born in Ohio but happens to espouse principles that are contrary to those that the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence stand upon. I think that that is a more durable, a better form of defense of the country. I think patriotism is about defending values. It's not really about defending kind of familial bonds. Now, I will say that if you read the Federalist Papers, and I think there's something to this, that tribal affinity is not necessarily a bad thing so long as it is tied to creed. So if people can join the family, tribal affinity is not terrible. The problem is tribal affinity in exclusion of creed. In other words, there's us in the room, we're the good guys, no one else gets to join. Now, the reason the conservative groups are great is because we all sort of acknowledge that if you become a conservative, now you're part of our team, right? Now you're part of our family. But there are those who are, I would say, nationalists in Europe who basically argue that true Germanness is being German, being ethnically German, or true Frenchness is being ethnically French, being born inside the borders of France, and you can't really become a true Frenchman. You're only sort of half a Frenchman. There are these people in the United States as well, they largely reside on the alt-right, who basically suggest that you're not a true American unless you have certain roots in America, even though some of these people are a generation old or two generations old like everybody else. Listen, there are certain mystic chords that strike in all of us when we see the flag, right? That strike in all of us when we watch a 4th of July parade. But what I would argue is that, and that's nationalism, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's good. But you're not doing your job as a parent or as a citizen if when you see the flag or you see the 4th of July parade, all you think of is other Americans at a baseball game, as opposed to thinking of what was this country founded on and why do we need to continually focus on that in order to revivify the beliefs that made America great in the first place. To make America great again, you actually do have to understand what made America great in the first place.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.